Now it's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation.
What are you people? On dope?
Where you can toke.
I inhale frequently.
Or you can talk.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
Or you can toke and talk.
10 federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
While we talk about toke on Toker Talk Radio.
So, by the way, when it comes to pot, if you're 40 years old, you live in a log cabin in Oregon, you got 12 giant pot plants in your backyard, have a ball.
Live from beautiful Portland, Oregon at Rolla J Studios.
Hey, this is great.
Just not cannabis.
Plus your calls live at 971-533-7111.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel? Gateway theory doesn't work. It's a reality.
Holland, is it real? Don't tease me.
We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years.
And now, here's your host, the guru of ganja graphics, the sultan of sativa statistics, and the worst nightmare of a reefer-mad prohibitionist. A polite, perspicacious, productive pothead with a propensity for PowerPoint. Radical, Russ Belville.
Oh, thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. 7 o'clock here in the Eastern Time Zone. I'm hanging out in South Carolina, or South Kakalaki, I understand is acceptable. Oh, my goodness. My first time here in the South and really enjoying it so far. Tomorrow morning, got to get up early because we're making our way to the capital of the Palmetto State. We're going to Columbia, South Carolina, myself and Big Daddy Fink, getting in the old vehicle and driving a couple hours in the early morning to meet with the Unity Torch in Columbia, South Carolina, the capital of South Carolina. We'll be doing our event from there. I might be speaking, I might not. Apparently, this is a very ad hoc, unpermitted sort of thing. So we'll see what happens, and let's see if I can avoid needing any bail money. That would probably be a good idea. But that'll be tomorrow, and we should be back from the capital back to our home base in time for me to get some audio from the event up on tomorrow's show. So we're looking forward to that. And then Friday, I will be making my way to Atlanta, Georgia, where we will be a part of the event there. That event takes place around noon in Centennial Park on Friday, and it's apparently some sort of walk/march, and we'll get more recordings and pictures from all of that. You can always find all of my information at Radical Russ everywhere online through Google Photos, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud, and more. So check that out. Also on Pinterest, all the graphs and data that I find as I'm surfing the net and researching my stories, I pin those up on Pinterest. I know a lot of people may not know Pinterest unless you're shopping or whatever, but I've found it very useful for sharing data graphs, so you can check that out as well. Coming up on this hour of the show, we have got great audio coming to you from Tommy Chong's interview with Steve Bloom from celebstoner.com and Freedom Leaf magazine. That'll be coming up about 24 after on the clock. Plus, we've got Leland Berger, who's a well-known, prominent marijuana attorney in Portland, Oregon. He spoke at the Oregon Marijuana Business Conference on a panel having to do with producers, processors, and extractors, and gives us the lowdown on the latest rules and regulations and licensing with respect to extracts in the state of Oregon. So stay tuned for that. Plus, we'll have time at the end for some ranting and raving, I'm sure. But before we get to all of that, I just wanted to discuss a little bit about the Adult Use of Marijuana Act in California, because once again, I've had to go through another online tussle with some of the people that they're just madly against legalizing marijuana in California. They do not like this Adult Use of Marijuana Act. And I get called also all sorts of names for being in support of, ending my criminality and your criminality for most of you. But California is going to be a special battle because of how lenient their medical marijuana system already is. So not only do you have a situation where there's a whole bunch of people who already feel like they're legal and feel like they're special, I think is another big part of this. There's a cliquish kind of feeling to it. Like, I'm a patient, I'm special, I'm protected. And that's being threatened. They feel it's being threatened, almost as if everybody's going to be let into their little club. And it's so easy for someone to get a medical marijuana recommendation in California. And if you're in one of the locations where you have access, well, maybe you're pretty reticent to rock the boat. Well, when we come back from break, we'll talk a little bit about that and dispel this notion that marijuana is somehow legal in the state of California already. You can talk about it too if you want. The phone lines are open for you at 971-533-7111.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Maui Wowie. Acapulco Gold. California Kush. Our strains stretch everywhere, too.
This is the Cannabis Radio Network.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com.
Tommy Chong is ready to cut through the smoke and change the tone of Toker Radio.
I hope everybody's got their vape pen handy, or their pipe, or their bong, or whatever you use to do your medicine.
But it's not a requirement. You don't have to be high for this show.
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
I don't know who you're talking to. You have to be high to do anything. At least I do. I don't know about you. In fact, I've been high so long that being straight is another high.
The Tommy Chong Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome to my world.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
Don't want to spend money on a night out, but don't know what to do other than watching TV or playing video games? Consider playing guitar, bass, banjo, or mandolin. The instrument will give you hours of entertainment with friends with minimal expense. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed. This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, and I've been going through my Facebook feed and Twitter feed as of late, getting a lot of attention from the stoners against legalization. I hate it when I call them that, so I will keep doing it. But lately, it's been some of the wackest complaints about the Adult Use of Marijuana Act in California. Just absolutely nonsensical sort of complaints. One that I heard today from a woman named Denise asked, with many exclamation points and question marks, it asked me, why in the world the Adult Use of Marijuana Act has a label on it that says marijuana is harmful. So, you know me, I look shit up. I went to the section. It's 26120 in the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. I believe it was Section C, Paragraph 1, something like that, 1A. But it's the mandated label that they're going to put on marijuana products, right? And it says, don't drive, operating heavy machinery, yada, yada, yada. It's for adults. And then there's one sentence, and this one actually got amended. This was added to the most recent version of the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, and it was that cannabis is harmful for pregnant or breastfeeding women, right? And that's what she's up in arms about, is this cannabis is harmful for pregnant or breastfeeding women part. Now, I'm not really supportive of that statement. I think there's a long way to go before we've proven harm to pregnant women, to their fetus, to their infant, to breastfeeding, right? I think there's very many medical benefits for a pregnant mother, especially if we're dealing with the trade-off of a pregnant mother who's got hyperemesis, who's, extreme vomiting from morning sickness, and the pharmaceuticals you'd have to give her to deal with that would be more harmful than the cannabis she could take. On the other hand, I'm not one to say also that there's absolutely no negative effect. I'm just saying we haven't gotten enough real valid evidence yet. What we found from Melanie Dreyer's studies in the 70s didn't seem to include any major problems, and I tend to think that if there were major problems for pregnant women and young infants from breastfeeding, from newborns, if there were any such problem through history, we would have seen the results. We would no longer have Rastafarians. There'd be no Rastafarian kids. They just would have died out, right? There'd be no hippie kids, right? I mean, come on. Regardless, the fact that part's in there, that there's going to be some warning about pregnant women and breastfeeding, right? That's your deal breaker? That's going to make you want to oppose legalizing marijuana? What, are your bongs for tobacco use only as well? You're going to let one little line on a warning label dictate whether or not legalization should pass in the world's 5th largest economy? Whether or not we should finally kick down the Berlin Wall of prohibition and finally end this nightmare, not just for California, but by legalizing in California, ending this nightmare nationwide. Once California falls, the rest of the states have to. That's just the nature of the beast. It's going to be the way it is. Texas doesn't get there until California legalizes. Kentucky doesn't get there until California legalizes. Iowa doesn't get there until California legalizes. So I'm amenable to reason. I'm willing to listen to complaints about the Adult Use of Marijuana Act that would justify maintaining the status quo. Now, of course, for some people who've got theirs, who've got their medical marijuana protection, justifying the status quo is fine, right? Hey, man, just go get your $40 recommendation, man. You'll be fine, man. You'd have an ounce and grow some plants, so everything would be cool, man. Except it's not everywhere in California. There's a lot of places where there's bans and there's contradictory language and moratoriums and problems. And never mind the fact people still get ticketed and people still get arrested and people still go to jail, even in California, for marijuana being illegal. Never mind all that. These people are willing to maintain that and to hand to prohibitionists. Can you imagine the wet dream that will be fulfilled for Kevin Sabet if California, for the second time, fails to pass marijuana legalization in the past 10 years? That will be the rallying cry for the entire anti-marijuana legalization movement. We've turned them back. After 4 states have legalized, Ohio rejected it, and now California's rejected it. The tide is turned. I could write the Project Sam headlines myself. So to hear these complaints, another complaint was, if we can't all grow 99 plants, it's not legalization. Well, newsflash, no place on earth has legalization then. I guess when I go back to Portland, Oregon, and I walk into my local pot shop and I buy my high-grade half-ounce of cannabis for $75, and I take it back in my pocket and walk by cops and walk by dogs and go to my house and smoke it, and nobody cares, and that's completely legal, I guess that's an illusion. I guess that was all just in my hazy, stoned mind, because since I can't grow 99 plants in Oregon, well, then it's not truly legal. Oh, and by the way, in Oregon, there's no amount of marijuana you can possess and get a felony. You cannot get a felony for marijuana possession, no matter how much you possess in the state of Oregon. Just so you knew that. But it's not legal here. Certainly not legal here because we can't have 99 plants. So I hear these complaints from people about the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, and they just don't even pass the sniff test. The only thing I can find in the Adult Use of Marijuana Act that makes things worse for cannabis consumers than they are now, and that for me is the litmus test. Does it make cannabis consumers' life worse? And the only thing I find in the Adult Use of Marijuana Act that gets worse is the public toking penalty. Public toking goes from $100 to $250 for the fine. That gets worse. The other thing that gets worse, there is, I believe, an open container provision. If you're caught with an open container of weed, meaning, an open baggie or a lit pipe or a joint or anything that's, smokable with inside the car, then you can get a fine for that too, I think. So those are the kind of things that people want to hold up and say, see, now we got to vote against it. That's just a way to prosecute people. Oh, and the conspiracy theories I get. Oh, the conspiracy theories that I'm being paid off by this person or that person to support this or that. Folks, here's something you can guarantee about me. I am for every legalization there is. I am for every reform that even helps one cannabis consumer avoid jail, avoid losing their stuff, avoid losing their health. That's why I even support these CBD-only laws, which don't do anybody a spot of good. And I know there's people out there that disagree with me. The Team Alexis and stuff that, say no to CBD laws, and I understand why. But I think even those laws move the rhetoric forward. They move the ball forward in some small way to get these states to begrudgingly admit that, yes, there is something medical about this. And once that's been admitted, once there is something beneficial about marijuana, even if it's just the CBD in it, once there's something beneficial about it, we've changed the entire framing of the debate. You know me, I'm all about the framing. The actual arguments you're making aren't as important as the arena you're making them in. And for so long, we've had to fight within the framing of the prohibitionists that marijuana was this demon drug, demon reefers, gateway drug, gonna lead you to heroin, nothing good about it, it's terrible, it's a habit, it's icky, it's the province of stoners and losers and long hairs and artists and hippies and wackos and bikers and so forth. And even, of course, going back to the racist elements with, Harry Anslinger and makes the white woman want to have sexual relations with Negroes and entertainers as if you needed marijuana for that. But it makes it a different battle when we're not fighting in that arena anymore, when we're not dealing with that. Once you've admitted some medical benefit, some benefit, just period, a benefit of marijuana, we've changed the arena. And the arena changes the more that people see that kids get benefit from it and that everyday working class people get benefit from it and rich people and celebrities get benefit from it. We've changed the entire framing of the argument. See, in the arena where it's the demon reefer, then there's rhetorical and moral justification for punishing the people involved with it. Once it becomes something of benefit to anybody for some reason, now it's harder to justify punishing people for it for any reason. It's like taking a hockey stick on the football field. It doesn't fit in that arena anymore. It doesn't work in that argument anymore. It doesn't make the same sort of root, gut-level emotional sense to the audience anymore. And that's happening. Even things like Cheech and Chong made a difference by taking it from demon reefer to at least just being comical. Every move has helped us.
I support a change in law and federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Here you go. That was the last pro-cannabis president, Jimmy Carter. Got to say that Obama's at least been neutral. At least he hasn't gotten in the way of legalization. That's helpful. Happy 420, everybody, back on the West Coast. I'm Radical Russ in South Carolina. We'll be right back with Steve Bloom interviewing Tommy Chong from the Oregon Marijuana Business Conference.
How high do you like your profit margin? CannabisRadio.com.
Ganjapreneur.com, your guide to the cannabis business world. Ganjapreneur.com is a comprehensive resource for cannabis professionals and entrepreneurs. Download the Ganjapreneur app on your smartphone or tablet to catch up on cannabis industry news, scroll through our daily job listings, and learn about successful cannabis companies, executives, and investors. Ganjapreneur.com, helping ganjapreneurs grow.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time.
The time has come to end prohibition of marijuana in Vermont.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time for marijuana sales to take place in regulated businesses
and stop taking place in our neighborhoods.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time to create rules for testing and labeling marijuana so that consumers can know what they're getting. It's time.
It's time.
It's time to stop punishing adults for consuming a product that's less harmful than alcohol.
And spend more time addressing serious crimes.
Prohibition has failed.
It's time for a more sensible approach.
S241 would end prohibition
and regulate marijuana in Vermont.
We are ready.
We're ready.
We're ready.
We're ready.
We're ready.
Vermont is ready.
Contact a representative now and ask them to support S241. It's time to end prohibition and regulate marijuana in Vermont.
This is Dan Michaels from danmichaelsaudio.com. And you're listening to Radical Russ on CannabisRadio.com.
With over 6 years of experience in the industry, New Era CPAs is one of the nation's leading cannabis accounting firms, helping hundreds of growers, dispensaries, and ancillary companies with their tax, legal, and business strategies. New Era CPAs offices cover the West Coast from Seattle to San Diego, and their skilled team is always available to help you take your business to the next level. Visit neweracpas.com for more info and set up a consultation. Welcome to the new era.
Warning, hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that. This is Dan Michaels from danmichaelsaudio.com, and you're listening to Radical Russ on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, and we're going to go back to another recording from Sunday at the Oregon Marijuana Business Conference. Steve Bloom from Celeb Stoner and Freedom Leaf Magazine interviewed comedy legend Tommy Chong for an extended 1-hour interview. Featured clips from Tommy's career and discussion of his pre-Cheech and Chong days as a musician and what he's been doing lately, performing with Tommy and his wife, Shelby.
What's it like performing with Cheech these days, all these years later? How does it go? How does the crowd respond?
It's so much fun. It is so much fun because we've changed so much. We're both old. It's like grumpy old stoners. He's writing his memoirs, and he's writing down stuff that, fuck, I don't remember doing that.
It's time for him to get back at you, right?
I don't know. No, Cheech has joined up. He's got his own strain out called Cheech's Private Stash. For real, yeah. And we're helping him with the strain.
So you're competing or you're working together?
No, he's working actually for us. We're helping. It's a funny story with Cheech because he didn't believe the pot thing was going to happen. You know, he thought he smoked pot. He was like a pothead, but he was kind of wary about it. You know, especially when I got busted. You know, his biggest fear was going to jail. His dad was a cop, so Cheech was like indoctrinated into that cop mentality thing. And so I went to jail. I was happy to go, man, shit. Adventure, you know. Embedded with the troops, you know. And the reason I didn't mind going to jail is that I had a friend that we got into a little thing. He stole the car, and then we went on a joyride, and the car turned over in some water, and we all survived, and it was a real good adventure, except my friend got 2 years in prison. But when he come out, man, he was all buffed, looking good, you know. And I thought, fuck, I wouldn't mind doing that. And then years later, I did it. It was a trip walking through the gates, looking at the prison, thinking, oh, shit, it happened. But it was a great experience, you know. But Cheech, he's a little, he didn't want to go to prison, you know. And we got busted one time in Tampa for obscenity. It was when Jim Morris, when he got arrested for showing his wiener on stage, and so the hall had a $5,000 bounty. Like if you broke that rule, any obscenity rule in any way, you forfeited $5,000. But to make it real, they had to arrest you, you know, to make it like a real crime. And so Cheech and I did our act, and we got arrested. Part of the reason was that we used to do dogs. Cheech would be a dog, I'd be another dog, and we'd smell each other's butts and try to hump each other, and the whole dog thing. And I guess the cops, or someone, the hall owner thought, well, that's obscene. And so they put us in jail. And when we went to jail, at first Cheech was really funny. He was joking with the guards, you know, and making jokes, because we just got off stage, and next thing you know, we're in jail, and so we still had that comedic vibe going, you know. And the guards weren't laughing at Cheech, you know. They're just giving him that guard look, you know, because to him, you know, Cheech is just another Mexican, you know, that got caught with drugs or something. So one time, this big redneck guard goes walking by, and Cheech goes, jail attendee, can I get some pink toilet paper? And the guard looked, just give him a look, you know, like, I'm going to remember you. And so then we thought we were going to be there for like, you know, half hour. Shit. 6 hours later, we're sitting there looking at each other. And so then it was time for them to split us up. You know, now like it looked like we were going to stay the night. And so they took Cheech by himself. That's when Cheech changed from being a comedian to being a very scared little fucker. A Mexican that's in a jail with a big redneck cop and going up an elevator. The Cheech's demeanor changed quite a bit. He told me, he said, yeah, first thing he said when he got in the elevator, you know, my dad's a cop. LAPD, yeah, 30 years, sergeant. So Cheech was always a little scared about being arrested. I was on the other, I loved it. I loved the adventure. I loved the people. Because I'm a people person. I study everybody. And everybody's got a story, you know. And if you're a movie maker like I am, you want to hear that story because you never know what you can use. So, like now.
All right, so we'll get back to talking a little bit more about Cheech in a minute, but we're going to go back in time a little bit and flash back to Tommy being born on May 24th, 1938 in Edmonton, Alberta, and he was raised in Calgary. So what was it like growing up for you in Western Canada?
It was interesting. It was fun, you know. It was... There's John Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath, you know, the 30s, the Depression, the Dust Bowl, and the wagons. Yeah. My earliest, well, my mother told me when I was born, my dad had got some homestead north of Edmonton, and he got it for a good price, I guess. And he was quite young, and so they moved out there, and there was no structure there. The only thing was livable was a chicken coop, and so my first memory, I don't remember being in it, but my mother, you know, and my dad, they cleaned out this chicken coop and made a home, and that's where we lived for a few months of my life. And then we had to move into Edmonton. I think my dad joined the Army, and so moving from the chicken coop into Edmonton, this is my mother telling me this, that we were on a horse-drawn wagon with all our furniture and everything on the wagon, and we were riding on top in the back, and we had a pet crow. My mother was very good with animals, and she had a pet crow, and then we lost the crow on the way to Edmonton on the wagon. And my mother she was a great storyteller. She's Irish, Scotch-Irish, and so she would tell me all these great stories about my early baby life, you know, my whole life. And my mother was very special, very beautiful. She was 5'8", dark-haired, just gorgeous. She came from a family of like 11 brothers and sisters, and she was the prettiest of them all. And then she got TB when she was in her 20s. I was about 4, I guess. And then she got TB, and so she was put in a sanitarium, and my brother and I were put in a home because my dad had some medical issues from the Army. And so I ended up in the hospital because they did an x-ray and found out that I had pleurisy. And so the whole family ended up in the hospital. And that's where I kind of got institutionalized, you know, right from early birth. And then I went from the hospital into a home, an orphanage, the Salvation Army home. And my brother was there. He was 2.5 years older than me. And so he was going to school. And so he had to go through that whole rough being a minority, being teased, not only a minority, but a kid from the home. And the schools, they went to public school, but the school would embarrass the kids by telling the home kids, please stand, and the home kids would have to stand, and then the teacher would give them a pint of milk free, you know, from the government. And my brother had to endure that. And so he learned how to fight real early in his life, fist fight. And he was very tough kid. And I was the opposite. I was very experimental. Like I learned about electricity. Our house never had electricity, so I didn't know anything about electricity because we lived with a kerosene lamp and a wood stove. And so when I was in the home, I found out that if you stick a needle into a wall socket, you get a shock. And it'll hurt. So that was my first thing about electricity. And my sister, we had a baby sister too. She was in the home too, and she was so beautiful because she was mixed. Like, you know, we were all mixed. We were brown, but she was especially beautiful. So she was so beautiful that the newspaper took pictures of her in being a tub and showing the home kids, you know, and she was the one that they used, my younger sister. And my brother, I would see him periodically during the day sometimes, and sometimes we would go days without seeing him, seeing each other. But he always protected me. He kept me under his wing. And then we moved, after the home, we moved into another house with no electricity, no indoor plumbing, no outdoor plumbing, the outhouse, and that's where I grew up. That was my earliest, I guess age 6 to 13. I grew up like in that environment, and that's where I learned, how to love nature, because there were no parks. There was just the fields, and the fields were just filled with everything any kid would need. And then if you walked across this field, there would be a little foothills with some poplar trees growing, and that was the only tree that we could see about a mile from our house. When I was a kid, my mother would pack a lunch for me, and I'd go off on a hike to the groves and climb the trees and just play in nature. And nature is so beautiful. You learn so much. And that's the way I grew up.
So you got into music at a young age, right?
Same age. There was a fiddle player that lived across the field from us. And my mother had when she was carrying me as a baby, she bought a guitar, and she used to hold it against her stomach and strum it. She couldn't play it, but she'd just strum the guitar. And she never learned to play. And so when I got around 10 years old, I picked up this guitar, and I started playing, learned how to play it. I really wanted to play the fiddle, and my dad and my mom, they bought me a fiddle, but I couldn't tune it. But I could tune the guitar, so I ended up playing guitar with the fiddle player that lived across the way. So I was 10 years old, and I was sitting and playing all-night party, a dance party, and that's where I learned the basic music, He taught me 2 things. He said, keep it simple and give the people what they want. That works for everything.
Tommy Chong at the Oregon Marijuana Business Conference, sitting down with Steve Bloom of celebstoner.com and editor of Freedom Leaf magazine. We're going to take a short break and pay some of the bills here and remind you that you can help us pay the bills at the Russ Belville Show. Just send me an email, radicalruss@gmail.com. We've got all sorts of interesting advertising and sponsorship opportunities. We're already speaking with a couple of groups out there that want to help us out with our website redesign. We've got all sorts of ways of making those kind of things happen. So if you're interested, send me an email, radicalruss@gmail.com. We'll take a break, and when we come back, Leland Berger on new extract regulations for the state of Oregon.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Seed to sale, clicks to conversions, and more. You're listening to the Cannabis Radio Network.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
I'm Radical Russ from the Russ Belville Show. Senator Mark Madsen of Utah. Mark, welcome to the show.
Everybody kind of turns a blind eye. They obviously have to go to some other state.
Representative Lou Fredericks.
We're going to get something on the order of nonviolent possession offenses.
State Representative Kathy Tilton.
Where does it go from personal use to commercial use?
It's the Russ Belville Show, the NPR of POT, weekdays live at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific, exclusively on CannabisRadio.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
As it relates to my brother, there's one thing I know for sure. He kept us safe.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Most of us pirates, we go on vacation to North Dakota, you know, because they've got a town called Argusville. What are you smoking there, boy? This is Dan Michaels from danmichaelsaudio.com, and you're listening to Radical Russ on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. We're still unpacking the audio from the Oregon Marijuana Business Conference. Got another clip for you coming to you from one of the panels that was on extracts. And one of the state's leading experts, Leland Berger, who's an attorney with Oregon Cannabis Compliance Council, spoke on the new laws and regulations on both the OLCC and the OHA side with respect to making extracts, which in Oregon are defined as those made with hydrocarbon extraction techniques.
Next is Lee Berger to speak about extracts.
Hi. I want to segue a little bit into extraction by talking about a little more about the processing stuff, if I can, or the concentrates, and also about the dosage limits. One activist who's not here, who's a lawyer, is Amy Margolis, and despite the differences that many of us have with her on many policy decisions, she at the Medical Rules Advisory Committee really stood up for us on these dosage limits. And basically what happened was the health authority tried to find a balance between Amy's arguments and the arguments from a group that showed up, at the very last minute with the OLCC, the pediatric emergency room physicians, who are all, what about the children? And, so OLCC or OHA has struck this balance. I'm hopeful that they, with adequate public comment, we might be able to move them. But I think at least in the short term, we may well be stuck with what are the lowest dosage limits anywhere for adults. And it's just going to be one of those things, as many legislators certainly tell me, that we just need to wait, and it'll be phased in. About 10 days ago, I was in Baltimore at the Patients Out of Time conference, and on the day when Pennsylvania signed the medical marijuana law and became the 24th medical marijuana state, in Pennsylvania, they're going to study whether to have flowers for 2 years, and then they'll begin to implement that. So the fact is, we are moving at a fast pace. I know it doesn't feel that way sometimes, but it is. The second thing I wanted to mention was about concentrates, is that on the homegrown, the 4 plants, 8 ounces that all adults are allowed to cultivate, we're also allowed to create and share concentrates. When we were drafting Measure 91, I called this when we have a potluck dinner, I want to be able to bring dessert, right? So it's really, there isn't any prohibition on that. What there is a prohibition on is on extraction. And it's an unfortunate reality, because the reality is that hundreds, perhaps thousands of patients and growers were safely blasting butane hash, and a couple of idiots blew up houses or a bathroom at a gas station. And it's the kind of thing that created a place where the legislature reacted to it the way that we created the Medical Marijuana Act, which is that if you have a license, then you're accepted from arrest and prosecution. But if you don't have a license, it's still a serious crime. In fact, in the classification of crimes that both Floyd and I spoke about, The one exception is the unlawful manufacture of marijuana that involves extracting, that involves unlicensed extracting. And that went into effect because although we used to, back in the day, only use the emergency clause, which makes a law effective on passage when it really, no kidding, was an emergency, now the legislature does it all the time so that we can't do a referendum, basically, is the only good reason for that. And so that went into effect March 1st, that you couldn't process unless you had a license, except nobody could have a license because they weren't accepting applications until April 1st. Anybody here get caught in that clusterfuck? My God, how fast are things moving when the legislature, intending to not make you a criminal, makes you a criminal? So I was involved a little bit as a part of, I'm legal counsel for, I think it's the Oregon Extractors Association, in trying to resolve that, to make it so that it was like, you know, being a patient, that upon application, and then of course, since it's the OHA, they made it completed application, then you have the protection of the law. But, you know, that was a huge problem. Speaking of law violations, just to go a little off topic if I could, you know, one thing I've been trying to do over the last 5 years is to transform my practice from, you know, Cedar mentioned that I had represented, I was honored to represent him years ago. And, but, you know, I don't like really doing criminal stuff anymore. And the reason I worked for 20 years to end cannabis prohibition was to get out of doing criminal law, to be able to sit around the table and conspire about how to cultivate and extract and distribute legally, instead of hearing sad stories from nice people about how, you know, their interaction with the government included a raid in their home. But lately there's been an uptick in my practice of driving under the influence of cannabis. So I want to remind everybody that it's against the law to drive under the influence of cannabis. Floyd also mentioned that we included in the Measure 91 3 times that the Measure 91 made no changes to the medical law. We also included that it made no changes to the driving under the influence law. We gave that to the OLCC, and the OLCC is required to report to the legislature in 2017. And my good news for today is that I think they're likely to recommend that that policy be continued, and that we're not likely to become a per se state where they take you and forcibly draw your blood. I'm really hopeful about that. Thank you. But you know, driving under the influence doesn't mean, you know, I'm all fucked up. It means that you are impaired to a perceptible degree. It means if you look like you're really impaired, then it's a problem. And in the cases, what I see are these sorts of problems. And so here's my free legal advice about driving under the influence. The first is STFU. Does everybody know what that means? It means shut the fuck up. Because, and actually my friend Jeff Steinborn, who's kind of like the dean of cannabis lawyers in the Northwest, he's graduated from Yale Law School in 1969, he's in Seattle. What he says to tell the officer is, my lawyer said he'll charge me double if I speak to you. As much as I'd like to answer your questions, I can't afford to. That puts everybody at ease. The second thing is, you know, all of us cannabis criminal lawyers have for years been saying, yes, P, no, DRE. What happens is you are invited to take field sobriety tests. If they determine that they have probable cause to believe that you're under the influence, they take you to the station. They ask you to take a breath test. If it blows 0-0, they ask you to provide a urine sample. As with the breath test, if you don't provide a urine sample, your license is suspended. You have a right to an administrative hearing, but unless there's some illegality by the police in the way that they obtain the sample, the suspension is likely to be upheld. All that the urine testing does, however, is show past use. It doesn't quantify when you had previously used. The drug recognition exam is problematic, and it's complicated, and it's certainly way beyond the topic of this conversation, but generally the advice that criminal lawyers have is you have a right to refuse it. That right cannot be held against you, and it's okay to refuse the DRE. I'm trying to think. I think I'm pretty comfortable. One really exciting thing that the legislature did in response to the medical industry or not the medical industry, but in the medical marijuana movement, is it allowed patients to take their medicine to processors and have the processors process it and return the processed medicine to the patient. And, Pete and I were talking about it, and help me if I'm misstating this, Floyd, but as best I recall, at least in statute, that applies both to OHA licenses and to OLCC licenses. And so I guess the very last thing I'll say is, I said early on that I thought we had accomplished in Oregon the best melding of the medical system and the adult use system with the least harm to patients. But where it's really pretty ridiculous is in processing. Processing for medical grade oil is exactly the same as processing for adult use oil. There's no reason on God's green earth why we should have to pay $4,000 twice to be able to supply both markets. And I guess so the last thought I would leave you with is that as with, we're in this exciting transitional time, and it's really, you could get the medical license until you get the adult use license, because when you have the adult use license, you're able, as I mentioned, to be able to sell to patients. I think the OLCC is likely to adopt rules that would permit that. And you can sell, to medical dispensaries, as long as they continue to exist. So that's it. I'll be here to answer other specific questions that you have. Thank you very much.
That's Leland Berger from Oregon Cannabis Compliance Council speaking at the Oregon Marijuana Business Conference in Eugene, Oregon, at the Hilton downtown in Eugene just this last Sunday. We'll have more of the panels and panelists from that conference uploaded to my SoundCloud page later on in the week. Follow me at Radical Russ on Twitter and Facebook if you want to get the updates on when those things will be posted. We're going to take a break and pay some more of the bills. Plus, a schedule reminder, there will be no Stoner Jesus show tonight. Stoner Jesus having some tech issues, even in Stoner Heaven. So we'll have a replay, and you can catch all the stonerjesus.net stuff out there as well. We'll come back and shut down the shop when we return.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Every strain, every sale, every medical study. Keep it right here on the Cannabis Radio Network.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be, the Vuber way.
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those posed by legal drugs. You can find Radical Russ online everywhere. Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, SoundCloud, Snapchat, LinkedIn, and Boise State University's 2400 baud modem bulletin board system from 1985.
Coming soon to a city near you, Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. Get all your cannabis accounting, legal, and compliance questions answered by their knowledgeable panel of industry experts who want to help your cannabis business boom. Whether you're a grower, dispensary operator, or a newcomer to the field, your cannabis business needs Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. For information on upcoming events, visit CannabisFinanceBootcamp.com.
And Blue Blasten Gergen, Pfaffen der Blasten, Schnurb Norben. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. As we close up shop today, one last word about the presidential contest. The news today, of course, is that Ted Cruz has announced that his vice presidential selection will be Carly Fiorina, the former Republican candidate, the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard Computers. And there's an article up on Leafly today. Vice President Carly Fiorina would be a cannabis catastrophe. My thanks to Ben Adlin for citing a quote of mine as I wrote in a column addressed to Carly Fiorina. I wrote this on marijuanapolitics.com when she brazenly, in that Republican debate, when confronted with a question about marijuana legalization, brought up the death of her daughter, her stepdaughter, from drug abuse. Now, her stepdaughter died from highly addictive substances, alcohol and prescription pills, I believe it was. But Fiorina was shamelessly using that as a what about the children pander to get people to fear marijuana legalization. Now, Ted Cruz, we know, is at least espousing a states' rights platform, with respect to the marijuana legalization question, saying that if there was a referendum on it in Texas, he'd vote against it. But if Colorado wants to be legal, well, that's up to Colorado. And we are pretty happy that none of the remaining candidates is really rabidly anti-pot, but with the selection of someone like Carly Fiorina by Ted Cruz, it has to make you question whether he would shift and be a little more anti-pot if elected. That's all the time we got for today. Thanks for joining us for this live edition of the Russ Belville Show from Anderson, South Carolina. We'll be in Columbia, South Carolina tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. If you're in the Columbia area, come on by and join us for the Unity Cipher ceremony. We're passing the torch all the way down the East Coast in celebration of cannabis activism and awareness to end prohibition throughout the East Coast. For everyone here at CannabisRadio.com, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it,